time on the 23rd of September by the conclusive session on eco-civilization health topic. We are through the autumn, we are going to invite you twice more to discuss the role of communities and the role of the individuum in our attempt to imagine the civilization of the future. The Circular Business Academy is hosting this event in cooperation with Violeta Bulc, the curator of the Ecocivilisation, and we have been supported by the Public Fund for Human Resources Development of the Republic of Slovenia, which has diverted some of the EU originating funds to support this conversation, and we are very thankful to that. I would like to say, I will send you these slides. Please read carefully these thoughts, because we have adopted the eco-civilization as a milestone of our mission. And I'm not going to read it all through, but I would like to tell you that our intent is to serve clients through a dedicated knowledge platform that enables entrepreneurs, managers, experts in various fields, investors, innovators, and policymakers to embrace circular business model innovation by creating, exchanging, sharing specific competence, and try on the civilizational paradigm shift. So we depart from business thinking, but we are aware that more than just day-to-day business is needed, much more to actually embrace a new paradigm. So it is a knowledge platform to exchange knowledge. We do it in several ways. We do it in several formats, like trainings, advisory, mentorship, incubation of sustainable innovations, ecosystems, and to facilitating financing for such new endeavors. We decided to go into the eco-civilization for one good reason: to be able to imagine where we are actually going. We are more than aware that we need to depart from the present state in many ways, but we would like to help each other by understanding what could be the destination, the desired destination of our journey. Because imagining our goal helps getting closer to it. And you know, it's a journey across a landscape of a paradigm change. So it depends on many factors. And it's, in a way, it's an exercise in designing scenarios. In practical terms, we are actually learning how to you know, design different scenarios and desired scenarios of future living. We are continuing with the essay contest. I would like to thank once more to all those who have sent us their stories, who have picked articles and suggested them for further reading. We have shared all this on our website. And now in these 3 new sessions, starting with this one, we would like to ask you to go on with this and then send us your comments, your further questions between the 2 sessions of each of the topics, so we will be able to get back and make a synthesis with our distinguished speakers. And today we've got a very busy time and we're going to have together with 4 very interesting personalities. I have already introduced briefly Violeta, the curator of the Ecocivilisation, who is going to make an introduction in a few minutes. As you may know, Violeta is a former EU Commissioner for Transport. She is also an entrepreneur, a writer, a publisher, a lecturer. and a consultant. So she's an experienced person dedicated to curate this paradigm shift. Today, we have three very interesting people with us who are going to approach, who are going to take us a little closer to, to how we could tackle health, a very important topic. Margaret Hanna, the fellow of the Faculty of Public Health in the United Kingdom. She is waving to us from St. Andrews in Scotland. She is also the author of a book titled Humanizing Healthcare, Patterns of Hope for a System Under Strain. Brett Hart sits just, he said, 20 miles, 30 kilometers outside Perth in Australia. Hello, Brett. I believe it's almost bedtime in Perth right now, right?
That's right. Past my bedtime.
It's after dinner, definitely, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Brett is a physician at Punkt Kurnu Aboriginal Medical Service, or PAMS, in its abbreviation. And he will take us to the world of Aboriginal tradition and take it from there by inducing us to think how we could take care of ourselves in a different way as individuals and as communities or even as societies. Barbara Chrovatin is our third speaker, a medical doctor with experience in general practice, pharmaceutical development and education, will present her point of view on the understanding of One Health and challenges that we are facing as a society right in this difficult period for all of us. Barbara she says she's just under the Castle Hill of Ljubljana, right? So we are really connecting, and that's quite close from Violeta. So I'm very pleased to having you all. Welcome, and I think it's time to begin. And by this, I would like to hand over to Violeta to connect. To make the connections between health and the eco-civilization concept. Please, Violeta.
Hello, everyone, and it's really exciting to be back. It's still a beautiful late summer in fall here in Ljubljana, and we are still very much outdoor, but this particular topic has really kept me thinking for the last couple of weeks deeply. I'm not going to reveal any significant truth, but I'm certainly today very much inspired by our speakers, and I know I'm going to learn a lot of new things. So it's great to see you being part of this discussion again. As Yuri said, some old names, some new names. Our network is building. I mean, especially I'm happy to get so much attention over this topic of our potential new destination, eco-civilization, from India and Africa. So I hope that this time Australia will come on board too, and of course United Kingdom, all the way up to the Scottish mountains. So we really are called upon getting deeper in the discussions about the world that we want to live in. I mean, we should not just give in and follow some sort of automatic stream. The strength of human being is that it has a capacity to create. So today, I'm really hoping we will open yet another chapter, which will stay around for a long time and kind of steer our imagination. But because the time is very precious, let me go straight into trying to make a link between eco-civilization and health, the way how it is offering itself at this point. But as we know, things constantly are a subject of change. So who knows what's going to be tomorrow, but certainly something that we are co-creating together. And here is, before I start, I would like to make a few announcements. A lot has happened during the summer. And if nothing else, we were able to officially launch just yesterday a new Ecocivilisation page. You can see it on the screen, ecocivilisation.eu. And there we're planning to make all the announcements, try to make links, share the partnerships, and especially really start publishing things that are related to eco-civilization. Of course, we will be closely related to the Circular Business Academy, where we will continue to deliver the webinars and hopefully some even more hands-on seminars and engagements over the next couple of months. At this page, I managed to publish also in English my first book that I wrote a couple of years ago, but it just now is gaining a fresh attention. You will find it on this page. It's a book about rhythms of business evolution, which was the first step in really thinking about in this process of imagining something fresh and new. And it's really pushing the limits of to understand what actually triggers the huge social shifts. What is at the back of these changes and how do they come about? And just through that, some amazing people I was able to meet, and some of course, a few present here today are very much part of this journey. I would also like to use this opportunity and say that hopefully by this time next year, we will also have the first book on eco-civilization, which will contain all the wisdom and challenges and hopefully a lot of still unresolved questions about our future. Of course, everyone who's part of this webinars and engagements will find its space in this new emerging book. So enough of the announcements, and let me just go straight into the topic. What we know today is that what is emerging has more and more support in any kind of system thinking, in any kind of evolutionary theory, which doesn't need to be only Darwin based, but it's the theory that acknowledges that things are building up and that the things are evolving, and that there are some geometrical rules, if you want, that somehow direct this evolution. And I do dare to claim that what we are discussing today, with all the iterations that will still follow, we are creating ticket for our existence. So that is one of the reasons why we found health such an important element and a topic to be discussed. And if we take a look in the basic model of eco-civilization that assumes 5 key entities which are the subject of our attention and our engagement, we see that health is a very strong element of relationships that exist either within the being itself or between the being, society, land, and our consciousness, which is sort of a historical wisdom, the collective wisdom. And we will see some very interesting provocative thoughts. However, I wouldn't be I if I didn't dare to put some on the table as well. And I'd like to share them with you. So my fundamental question when I approached to this subject was, how would I like to be treated in the health system? Who do I want to be? How do I want to be dealt with? And these are the questions I have for you. Would you be willing to become an active player in a preventive care approach? Because today we see that we are pretty much all the time in a curating mode, which means we try to address our challenges when we already become sick. So what do you think about the concept of doctors being paid for keeping you healthy? I know it's an old philosophical question, thousands and thousands years old, but it got somehow lost in the stream of history. Is it time to revive this question and ask ourselves, could we restructure the way how we think? What is really health? Is that only an absence of a disease? Or is there a different way of looking at humans as beings? Could it potentially be an acknowledging humans as holistic, multidimensional beings, acknowledging humans as a sophisticated system in a need of holistic approach for her or his development? Could it maybe be defined by looking for ways to keep those dimensions in balance? Could the balance be the focus and not particular element? Constantly supporting, strengthening health and joy and love and collaboration and keeping the energy level high. Could you imagine that this is something we deal with? Encouraging our body to signal what it needs and provide the necessities for self-healing. Could that be the one? Because all that is possible as long as we start asking ourselves the right questions. Or could it be that we need to focus more on care and healing, on individual needs, acknowledging that each body is unique in his or her needs? I think that is completely absent from the current system. But I know that the research shows that only 25 to 30% of patients actually are fit for the medicines that are out there or for the common consumption. Is there a chance that we refocus our attention and focus more on resilient adaptability and our immune system to be more adaptable, to be more resilient? Or is that only fascination? Shall we take a look at a human being from a bit more holistic point of view? And I'm offering these 6 dimensions of human being that personally, without a really deep knowledge about who we really are, I find it motivating that at every point I look at myself, my friends, my colleagues, people I meet on the street from all these dimensions. And all of a sudden I see different people, not just physical, not just emotional, not just intellectual, but I try to sense people on a spiritual level, and especially on the energy level. And I haven't seen any health system so far that would be, that it's addressing these dimensions and trying to help us to keep them in balance, because we know that whenever things are imbalanced, that's where problems appear. And in every system, and humans, we as individuals are no different. We are a system. So that's what exactly fits into the overall picture of the model of eco-civilization when we talk about beings, when we talk about different values, different types of levels of interaction. And I'm sure that this particular element of the basic model of eco-civilization will be deeply challenged, and hopefully we will have more and more clear picture of how to keep it in balance and how to keep it well engaged with other elements, as we mentioned before, the society, the land, the other types of relationships, and of course, the overall consciousness and global wisdom. So with that in mind, I cannot but comment today's speech to the Union of European President van der Leyen, where for the first time, it was called for a stronger European health union. And that is a really, really important step forward, that we start looking at health on an EU level from a system point of view, as a system, as an integrated system that we are all part of. However, I do have to say that there are plenty of rooms for improvement. At this point, the system is focusing, and the solutions proposed are focusing merely on stockpiling, supply chain, pharmaceutical products, and financing of course, all these elements, including the establishment of European BARDA, which is an agency for biometric advanced research and development. All that is fine. And now it's our job to make sure that when we do that, when we use these resources, when we address these technical elements, that we do put human being, a society, and all beings really in the middle of this observation. That is my proposal. And now I'm more than happy to listen all the thoughts of our distinguished guests, and let's see what we can say at the end as our key message and as our starting point for the further collaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Violeta. Thank you. I am going to pass straight to Margaret now. And I'm inviting her to take the floor. Please, Margaret Hanna.
Thank you, Yuri. But I think it'd be really nice if we could, we organised our order with Brett starting, then Barbara, and then I'll finish. So Brett, if you would like to start, it's all one. It's all one. It's all one.
Thank you, for your generosity. So Brett, it's
okay. Thank you very much. And as you can see, I'm talking to you from my garden in Glen Forest, where I have frequent visitors like these ones here. But I need to share my screen now, and hopefully you can see it now. Is that right?
Not yet.
Yeah. So this is the overall title, but I'm subtitling it. If I just get my pointer working.
Brett, you need to press, when you've got to share screen and onto your thing,
oh, yes,
you need to actually press share.
Yes. Thank you, Margaret. So share screen, press share. Yes, you're right. First of all, choosing which one. Thanks for your help, Margaret. So hopefully that's given you the overall title. Is that right? And then I've got my subtitle, which is the imperative to transiliate the eco-health. And the transiliate, I've actually invented that word from the word transilience, which is to leap from one thing to another, which is what we need to do. So I'm speaking to you from Australia, as you gathered, where there used to be about 250 languages and 60 dialects until 1788, when after a few years they decided there's only one language in Australia, and they banned speaking all these languages, but there are still a few left. So I want to start by acknowledging the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional custodians of the country where I reside. I pay my respects to the Noongar elders, past, present, and emerging, to guide our transition to the Symbiocene. Now that last bit I've taken the liberty of adding. The term Symbiocene was invented by a colleague that we worked together a while back, Professor Glenn Albrecht, who's an environmental philosopher, who's saying that we need to get out of the era of the toxic Anthropocene and move to this new one, which he defines, but it's very complex definition. And he describes what the first peoples of Australia have practiced for over 60,000 years. And I think Violetta's vision is consistent with what the Symbiocene would be like. And I quote, to be in balance with the planet, the universe, with ourselves and our fellow humans. And just pointing out where I live, just about 30 k's, as you were saying, Luge, out of Perth, where that arrow is pointing. And I'm also talking to you from our spring. And there are 6 Noongar seasons. And so we're talking to you from the Jilba season. And each tribe has different seasons, but most go with 6. Okay, let's start with the bad news and hopefully move to some good news. So the bad news is we've got a triple tsunami with healthcare systems geared to respond after the destructive waves have crashed. And washing hands and the promise of a vaccine are not existential solutions. I like to quote from the British Medical Journal. The current COVID-19 crisis calls for a paradigm shift in public and global health policies, close quote. So that's what we've got to tackle, the greater than the sum of the individual parts whammy, a syndemic. So a syndemic being one epidemic on top of another one. But problems are opportunities in disguise, following from Martin Luther King's quote there. So my aim is to convince you that when it comes to health, we've got the balance wrong. So when considering Aaron Antonovsky's spectrum, most countries spend about 90% of their health budget on repair shops for illness and disease. So the balance, as Violetta was saying, needs to shift from seeking out pathogens to enhancing salutogens. And Barbara's going to discuss that shift a bit later on. Now, as a presentation by the Dean of the School of Public Health at Boston University, Sandra Galea, helps make my point by demonstrating the average spending of health per capita. And as you can see there, the United States, top of the pack. But I just want to point out Japan, which is the dark green line there. When you see the next slide, there's Japan with the greatest life expectancy versus health expenditure, and there's the United States. So they're not getting a good bang for their buck, are they? So yes, we know that income has an influence on life expectancy, but after a while it really doesn't help. Having a vast income, it doesn't make much difference. But in fact, it probably, and I'm suggesting this is what's happening, is that there's actually a price to be paid for the carbon footprint, and that's certainly making its presence felt in the United States when there's a book just come out, The Deaths of Despair, and in the United Kingdom, shit life syndrome is being blamed from reducing life expectancy. And this has been suggested as a cause in the United States. So when people say we need to consume more to deal with the damaged economy from COVID, I'm not sure that's the best thing we should be doing. And here I just want to quote again from an international journal which says COVID-19 has highlighted the fact it's time we acted on the long known fact that 90% of our health and well-being are influenced by factors other than access to clinical services. As you can see there, only 10%. And as I said before, we should think of them as repair shops. And here in New South Wales, you can see how most of the budget goes towards the last 30 days before death. So again, not a good return on investment. So this was picked up by an economist about 10 years ago, saying we really need to shake the whole system up, because it's bizarre that we're measuring failures and not success. But then how do you measure success? But imagine a business like Coca-Cola reporting to their the shareholders saying, well, we didn't sell this number of bottles each year. It just wouldn't make any sense, would it? So imagine how different the health system would look if here we have a list of the commonest cause of death in America, and you see acute myocardial infarct at the top. So it's understandable there's a lot of effort going into trying to prevent that. But what if, and this is Sandro Galileo again in his work, and he worked out the social factors associated with death. And imagine what would happen if these appeared on death certificates, how it would actually make a difference to the system. So you see some of these things on a par with these commonest causes of death. So what do you think is associated with myocardial infarct as the commonest cause? Well, not cause, but an association. Low education. So this is my cue for a quick ad. Oh, it's not there. What a shame. Anyway, low education and improving education is obviously a key factor in reducing inequity. This was a statement was put about by Professor Sir Michael Marmot at the launch of his report, Closing the Gap in a Generation. And of course, people used to say, well, if we really boost the economy, there would be a trickle-down effect. But as you can see there on the right, it's really a trick. It's not real. There's not much evidence to back that up. And here's, well, I prefer this definition of health from the Aboriginal community, talking, as you see there, talking about a cycle as opposed to our impression that it's a womb to the tomb, a linear approach. There's much more circular, as you can see here. And I haven't got time to read out all the different components, but I just want to pick up on the country side of things because that relates to our ecology. And so they say Aboriginal people are intrinsically linked to the land and country before birth, lineage, culture and identity. And the Aboriginal law, spelled L-O-R-E, and spirituality are heavily intertwined with the land and being on country. A disconnection from country, culture and family contributes to an unhealthy state of mind, body and soul. So this is conveyed in a poem which I won't have time to read out, but it actually features in the beginning of this book, Overstory, which is a remarkable description of how trees communicate with one another. And this Kanyini is well, I'll just read it out. It says, roughly translates as responsibility and unconditional love for all of creation. And I think that provides a creed for the Symbiocene. And then going back to the circular perspective that a lot of Aboriginal people have in terms of holistic social and emotional well-being, you can see all these connections. And to be connected, you need relationships. And I know Barbara and Margaret will be expanding on the importance of relationships. So that's it from me. So over to Barbara, I believe.
Thank you, Brad. So Barbara will expand on that. Is that correct?
Do you want a little pause, Yuri, before we move on to the next presentation?
Are there any questions in between? It's very interesting. Brad, thank you very much for this. If there are any questions, please don't hesitate. Raise your hand, join in. Anybody is allowed to switch on their mic and just speak up. You should briefly present yourselves and ask a question, and we'll try to address it right away. If there's going to be a broader topic, then we will be able to expand later on, not to fully interrupt the flow. So take it as an invitation, please. Other than that, I would say that
I have a quick one, Yuri. Is Australian government at all getting sensitive to this kind of messages? Have you seen any improvements over the years?
I think South Australia has taken it up more probably than any other state. They had a health in all policies unit established there, and they had a summer school which I actually attended. So they've sort of been ahead of the pack. I know Western Australia went and had a look and decided it wasn't for them. But the person who's really understands this, and I guess that's sort of conveyed in my presentation, is Kim Wyatt, who's the Indigenous Minister, and they've just brought out new targets. A lot of those targets point to what I would call upstream issues, such as early childhood and that sort of thing. So really that they don't have top of the list, for example, ischemic heart disease, those sorts of things, and improving treatment, although that's part of the process, but they are looking more at that, which is great. But there's a long way to go because we're so behind. You know, the Aboriginal statistics are appalling, but at least they're starting to identify the importance of the social determinants. Because Ken White used to be at in the health department. He was a teacher, so I didn't need to persuade him very much. But it's going to be a long time before we see the benefits of that.
Okay, but at least there is already a little hook, and we can invite them in and we continue to dream together, and then start manifesting a more holistic and modern approaches. Thanks, it was very valuable insight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I can see Andrew's got his hand up. Andrew Campbell, but he hasn't turned his mic on.
Well, please, the word is yours.
Hi, Brett. Have you came across the nuclear system of care in South Central Foundation in Alaska? Because I'm looking at what you're talking about. Margaret Hannah's aware of this also, and you're reading the same hymn sheet.
Yeah.
The language of humans and society set up to take care of the individual as part of creation of the system, of the ecosystem, and not as a disparate. I liked also how you looked at mediators not being what's wrong with the person, but what's going right and how do we get that better, rather than what's wrong, how do we fix the wrong, to how do we prove the right that will bring the wrong into line with the right. I like this. I just want to ask, have you heard of Nuka? I can't remember the name. It's Gothberg, I believe, but I can't remember her first name. Maybe we're making contact.
Well, thanks to Margaret. I've heard about Nuka, and Margaret knows a lot more about it than I do, but it sounds fantastic and it's totally consistent with what you've just been saying. So I think, Margaret, you're going to be talking about Nuka anyway, I think.
I am. I'm going to be talking about Nuka.
Okay.
So that'd be good.
So I think it's Barbara's turn now. It'd be lovely to hear from Barbara now.
Thank you, dear colleagues, dear fellow travelers. Let's continue walking together in a common space of inquiry. It is an invitation to a slower and deeper thinking that we are used to, I believe, in these unprecedented times of conflicting messages. What I'd like to do is to explore the landscape of a possible dream of medicine and health through addressing two parallel movements already alive, already visible, both having person in its title, one more humanistic, person-centered care, and the other technologically based, personalized, or over the pond. They also use the word precision medicine. I'd like to walk us briefly through those two movements because I believe they expose challenges ahead and also, importantly, show us hidden assumptions that are driving our world of medicine, of driving of which questions we can ask ourselves, what at all is possible, and where we are moving as a society. In my talk, I will use a lot of dualities like subjective, objective, body, mind, and such, but I'd like to invite you to to understand them as an invitation to transcend dualities, not to get entrenched in either or thinking. I would like my reflections to be understood, although sometimes may be critical, because in crisis we indeed are, but more as a love letter to medicine of the future, from a medical doctor, from a student of medical anthropology, from a caregiver, and also from a chronic patient. Ooh. So let's ground ourselves in a clinical encounter, in something that we all, I'm sure, have experienced firsthand. This is Maria. She has lots of different burning issues impeding her everyday life. When she comes to her GP, this, through biomedical frame, is translated into separate disease entities, each with their own tests, diagnostic measurements, treatments, patient groups, clinical guidelines, medical specialities. Yet, if Maria would be given a chance in a trustworthy and compassionate relationship to speak about her childhood neglect, about her lifelong lack of self-confidence, and if we would be to consider newest scientific evidence, we could see that maybe all of this is not separate, not as silos. These entities are drawn as silos on purpose. So with newer scientific evidence, we are getting under the skin. We are seeing how subjective, immaterial can actually be imprinted, is the word, or inscribed in the bodily substance. We can speak about allostatic load. We can speak about chronic inflammation, but all in all together, this can be called biology of disadvantage, where humiliation, neglect, abuse, disillusionment, lack of opportunities is translated into biological processes. We do know now that biography, that life experience, life circumstances get embodied. One of the biggest body of evidence for it are so-called ACEs, or adverse child experiences, where we can trace measurable chronic diseases and substance abuse decades after negative child experiences. We know that it is important where we are born in, where we grow up, where we work, where we age. It is measurable in our life expectancy and our morbidity. And most recently, maybe perhaps for many surprisingly, the Human Genome Project has produced more questions than answers. We discovered epigenetics. We discovered vast areas of our genome, of DNA, that are responding to internal and external stimuli and are creating patterns, emerging patterns on the intersection of human and its environment, on the intersection of subjective and objective. Anthropologists call it embodied ecologies, this fluidity of our embodiment, where we must foreground relations instead of bounded, separate entities. All of this is gaining even more attention, even more imperative in our age of Anthropocene, with vast human cost destructions in social and Gaia life. So what were the responses? What is our hope for the medicine of the future? One is called precision or personalized medicine. It is technology-based hope for more efficient healthcare of the future, where we would gather immense amounts of data all through life, our genomics, transcriptomics and all other omics, plus environments, plus our lifestyles, and all of the medical records would be constantly, from the womb to the tomb, gathered in the cloud, creating so-called medical avatar, with which we are hoping to understand disease processes better and intervene more fine-tuned, more individually fine-tuned, more time precisely. We can see that this is a future that is deepening our technological gaze and is opening lots of questions. And not least of all is leaned upon the hope of technology as our salvation, as solving our societal problems, but also saving us money. We are far from it. Let's just glimpse into what already is here. Electronic health records, an obligatory way of being in any healthcare setting. If we look through published materials of physicians' feedback facing computers, they use the words as tethering, chained to, burned out, turning into administrative workers, while patients are receding further back into the data collection called the iPatient. More than half of physicians' time, so the research is showing us, is now spent in computer, attending to computer versus relational tasks. And this all is going on in an aura of technological neutrality, where we are searching for smart solutions, where it is easy to overlook broad array of different interests integrated into these technologies, where patients and physicians are seldom a part of. And it is easy to skip over how these technologies are not just noting and surveying, but actually reshaping, restructuring clinical reality. Shaping where does our attention go, what is really important, what can be overlooked. So the other spectrum of person initiatives is person-centered care or relationship-centered care, or whole person care. These are all different wordings for the same vision of taking into account the whole of a human being, the self-aware, meaning-seeking, purposeful, and relational nature of us. But how? How can we do that in this system, in ever more time-pressured, fragmented, rules and regulations-led everyday medical practice, where medical education is lagging and research are lagging far behind from diving deeper into humanistic frameworks? But there are glimpses of different ways of doing and teaching medicine. One that I wish to mention is narrative medicine. Rita Sharon's work from Columbia University, New York, where students learn through art and literature, very unusual for a naturalistic framework of medical students, are building their capacity to listen, to be moved by and to absorb another person's account, and to be moved towards well-being of another. The healer's art is another one, Rachel Naomi Raymond's work in UCSF. Both are gaining recognition all over the world. But maybe most surprising from the very esteemed professor, physician of Harvard, Arthur Kleiman, that recently came also to be a caregiver for his very ill beloved wife. He's calling for caregiving as moral work, as something that medical schools and hospitals issue out of their core attention, and how important it is to turn it back into medicine and ways of living in the modern world, to recognize it, as important. Another way of dealing, of addressing, of taking into account the whole person is integrative medicine. Whole person and primacy of therapeutic relationship is at their foundations. So I hope that I opened the space to see these chiasms of mind, body, nature, nurture, subjective, objective in a different way. With all this biomedical research now showing us that it's time to go beyond those separations. This research not only ACEs and epigenetics, but also placebo. How can something that is nothing produce measurable effects? And also about compassionate relationships in healthcare, proving better health outcomes, together with problems that are unaddressed in biomedicine as multimorbidity, medically unexplained syndromes, polypharmacy. This all behooves us to go beyond the dualisms and tap into the wisdom of whole systems as humans are. So can we move towards causes of causes where human being is never far from its environment and experience? I do believe we can glimpse the shifting towards salutogenesis, from management of diseases to enabling, evoking, helping, creating healing environments, where what matters to you is as well important as what's the matter with you, where we can strengthen and cooperate with healing processes within, not just to rely on external expertise power from without, where being with is as important as doing to. I remember Eric Cassell, one of our greatest teachers of personhood, he said, don't just do something, be there, paraphrasing the known parabola. So I hope we can shift our attention more towards emerging properties of whole living systems, where recognizing, acknowledging, and affirming another human being is possible. Because it is important to be aware of what is our intention, and it is important to notice what we are supporting and growing with our attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barbara. Very interesting, very compelling. I've got two, let's say, reactions more than questions. Wasn't it a task of a general practitioner some time ago to actually help people getting into, this salutogenesis state of living? Maybe it was meant like that in, maybe 100 years ago or so. And we lost it down the road somewhere. And where do we go if not to, to a hospital? Which institutions can help us? Because as Brett said, yes, Aboriginal tradition had it, but it got lost to quite some extent. So what can we do about it?
Yes, it is. It seems that together somehow with our developments, with our powerful tools of intervention, we seem to lose the wholeness vision of not only the human being, but of its life context. If we look even at biomedical research, we carefully exclude the context from research trials in order to find specific causality and specific treatments. So we are somehow caught in the success of modern medicine treating acute situations really brilliantly, but leaving us somehow barehanded, empty-handed with chronic conditions that are so inseparably connected with life that we are all creating. So, and on the other hand, there's also, for all of us, I believe, this great fascination with numbers, the seduction of objectivity, with measurements, with tables and manipulation of things in order to. It's very difficult to listen to what already is and to tap into the wisdom of whole systems, being not only attentive to separate things, but to all of the stuff that it's in between, that's shaping reality. So I believe this is a different way of thinking that we, all three of us, Brett, Margaret, and I are thinking about. And it's, as you can probably notice, it's even difficult to articulate it. We are on the verge of finding words together that could describe this different world, ways of thinking, ways of educating, these discovery models that we need to find something together for the future.
Okay, but if I try to reply to myself, so it could be the general practitioner, but even before we get to her or to him, it could be parents, it could be teachers in the primary school, right? I mean, this is where this knowledge was totally lost, is obviously, this is where we got dehumanized in some way. And, you know, for example, marketeers call it, you know, product myopia. And it's bad enough when it gets to yogurts, because you get, you know, nicely packaged, but, you know, not very healthy yogurts. But it gets even worse when it comes to let's say, pharmaceutical products or so. That would be my brief understanding. And shall we go on, Margaret? What do you say?
I'd like to go on, because I think actually we're just at the right point really now to hear this third contribution.
Violeta, would you like to have a short comment before Margaret picks it up?
Oh, just go ahead. The flow has already taken place.
Let's leave the...
Okay. So many thanks everybody for letting me contribute to this extraordinary series of seminars. I feel very honored and privileged to be here. I actually had to look up the word individuum. As a natural English speaker, I wasn't quite sure what it meant. We tend to speak of an individual, but an individuum is something that is indivisible. There is no division of the universe. There's no division of a human being. So there's an interesting exploration to be had just with that one word in the title of the series. So just wanted to mention that. And also to say the meaning of health comes also from the same root as whole. So whole and health and hail, which is an old English word for health, they all mean the same. It's all about that indivisible life. So I want to tell you a little bit about International Futures Forum, because that's where I'm now based. It's an educational charity based in Fife in Scotland. And we're trying to take effective action in this century as we face multiple and complex urgent challenges that are happening all at the same time. And we offer various programs and products to help people engage with those challenges wherever they are. We're very much a Creative Commons principle, so much of what is available free for download from our website. And we're in touch with many thousands of people around the world who are, to quote one of our early influencers, Don Michael, trying to make a difference in the face of all that gets in the way of making a difference. And that's where I am in Fife in Scotland, quite a few miles from Slovenia, where I realize a number of you are based, but we're all on the one planet, as we're very much aware today. And I want to just talk to start with about this kind of frustration that I think we've heard in the previous two talks, and indeed some of the comments, about the way in which our mindset is so tied into the metrics and the regulatory frameworks that we work in. I've worked in healthcare for over 2 decades, and my attention was driven largely around those issues of quality, outcome, and standards. And the evidence that I was relying on was built from over 200 years ago, probably 300 to 400 years ago, the clinical gaze, the way in which we are looking at health problems from that very objective position that Barbara talked so eloquently about. And the only evidence that seems to be admissible in healthcare, in medical practice in particular, is the randomized controlled trial. So if you're not tied into those, you're not included really in the existing frameworks, and it's very, very difficult in that world to be imagining that anything could be any different. And yet we know, as Violetta was saying, you know, the human being is so full of imagination and potential, and life itself is so full of surprises. The future is open. So how might we be able to utilize that space of possibility in the ways that we engender change in our healthcare systems? So I was fortunate enough to know about the IFF from its beginnings, and they use something called the 3 Horizons framework to think about that transition. The first horizon is the business as usual that we know about at the moment. In future, and the horizontal axis is the time here, in future that's going to be a far smaller element of our pattern of healthcare, because the vertical axis describes the pattern that we live in. And because of all those signs of strain and system failures, we keep trying to do things differently and innovate in order to keep things going. So, for example, Violetta announcing that the European Union are now wanting to do European health, but they're actually only going to do it in order to keep the current system going for just a bit longer. But in the meantime, there are some radically new ideas that are far better fit to the new environment that we're going into, which is our third horizon. And in the process of this kind of transition, we have to start to ask ourselves, where are we innovating? Are we innovating to just keep that first horizon going? Or could we be innovating to help that third horizon emerge? Because we are entering a new, different world. There's going to be a new paradigm that fits and takes off in due course, at which point there will be less disruptive change and a new context for the useful things from the old ways, because we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. The first horizon has given us a legacy on which to build, but we have to recognize that much of what it does today is no longer fit for purpose. The difficulty is that that's a tough ride. It's a turbulent transition that we're now living through between one and the other. And I'm just using this model and frame to think about healthcare. Ecocivilisation, it could actually be used to think about that as well, across all sectors, all levels of society, and just wanted to make that note here. The way that we use the 3 horizons is through conversation or surveys and interviews, and we basically ask a set of questions about what are your current concerns in the system that you operate in? What are your H1 concerns that it's not sustainable for the long term? And then we ask them, so what's your aspiration for your future system? And we've heard a lot of that today about love, care, humanistic, community-based, holistic, recognizing our ancestors, our cycles of life. And then we also ask, so have you got any examples of that you're aware of already that are happening anywhere in the world. These examples of the future in the present provide us with hope and inspiration. And it's only at that point can we start talking about, well, what are your innovations? What are you doing that you think is promising? Because you can then start to distinguish between those innovations that are propping up the first horizon and those innovations that got real promise in terms of achieving our aim to move towards a more an H3 for the future. And finally, we will ask them, well, what are the things that we have to keep from our current system in order to ensure that it remains safe, legal? Often it's about the governance in order to keep things robust. So some years back, and this slide comes from 2009, and I don't expect you to read the detail. I just want to show you that we went round a bunch of clinicians and managers, carers, patients, and asked them those questions. We asked them what their concerns were around the first horizon and the sorts of things that people were being looked after in the wrong place, staff are demoralized, the management attention is all on silos and short term. All of this stuff is very familiar if you work in a healthcare system today, and COVID has only made it worse. And then you ask them about their aspirations and they say, we want more autonomy for ourselves and our communities. We want to make best use of our community resources. We want it to be loving, caring and respectful, very much a more human system, and it's beyond denial, it's honest and open. And then we ask them, so have you got examples of that aspirational future that you know about in the present? And there are lots of little examples here, about a Maggie's Centre, various village models of healthcare and use of technology to help with access to expertise. But one struck me as very interesting because it was described as an integrated non-medical model of healthcare in Alaska. And I got interested in this and found out that it was actually the NUCA system of care run by the South Central Foundation, who are Alaskan natives. They previously had a healthcare system that was delivered to them by the federal service. It was actually called the Indian Health Service in those days. It was really poor in terms of its performance. It really didn't reach any of their needs. And they decided to take it over themselves. And using those federal dollars, as well as other sources of income from Medicare and Medicaid, they were able to run their own healthcare system based on their own cultural and community lines. And in a very short space of time, within 5 years, they started to see reductions in the use of the emergency department, reduction in inpatient stays, reduction in outpatient stays, and a massive improvement in their customer owner satisfaction, their employee satisfaction, and many of their health outcomes. So this was an impressive record, something that Don Berwick, who is the former president of the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, described as one of the world's best examples of what happens when you take that community approach, design with the community a healthcare system that works for them. And here's some examples, because we actually visited them, and they use obviously their natural materials from their forests, using Alaskan designs, lots of light in their buildings, and they use their cultural dancing and story to help with their recovery, community recovery, not just individual recovery. And I wanted to draw your attention to what they call the talking room. This is a consultation room, and you can see that the two chairs are on the same side of the computer. So it's different from what Barbara was describing. And it's not clear when you walk into that room which chair you sit on, because you're equal partners in that relationship. And they call them talking rooms because 80% of primary care is a conversation. And in that picture, we have on the right the Alaskan Native healthcare provider, and on the left, one of our local GPs from Fife in Scotland. So we came back very inspired by that. It gave us hope, it gave us encouragement, and we went back to ask ourselves how we could do it for ourselves. These were the sorts of things they were telling us. Healthcare systems are human systems. People have diseases. Diseases don't have people. and that wellness depends on relationships to oneself, to each other, and the wider world. Those relationships are built on quality listening and good conversations. One of the things they said is that we don't have very many meetings, but we have conversations all the time. And recovery has to be culturally coherent. It has to make sense to you. It has to give meaning in your life. And by sharing your stories, both individually with your care providers, but also collectively in groups within your community, it can really help that recovery process to start to make sense of what you've been through, that experience, and give meaning to your life again. So when we went back, I mean, we decided to try, we got funding from a program called SHINE, from the Health Foundation, a big philanthropic organization in the UK. And we said we wanted to find ways with people with those chronic health problems to thrive, not just survive at home. That was our aim. To do so, we had to explore what matters to them, what's important to them, using good conversations, which is a solution-focused approach. And by doing so, nurture quality relationships with them, with we don't want to call them patients anymore. People formerly known as patients is how I tend to describe them. Our clients, sometimes people call them. And we wanted to build a quality relationship with them, but also for them to build quality relationships with others in their lives and co-create solutions with and by our community. I'm not going to go into the full detail of all of this because we don't have much time, but what I wanted to try and tell you was how the journey that staff have been on in the course of this. Because in the end, the staff are key to changing our healthcare systems. And they realized that in order to change, they had to change first. They couldn't expect other people to change if they weren't already willing to change. And they recognized it wasn't about more staff. It's not always about just more. It's about the way we work, and that we have to work in a much more integrated way and in partnership with our community. And in addition, this thing that, well, we're trained, this is what we're here to do. We're here to provide healthcare. You're asking us to do social and spiritual care. I'm a clinician. I don't do that stuff. But now they realize you can't actually provide quality healthcare if you're not also attending to social relationships, exploring meaning and purpose and what gives us joy in our lives. And that's not just towards our patients or clients, it's also towards ourselves. And so the teamwork really it gets nourished in the course of this way of working. And then those metrics that drive us towards counting activity and inputs makes us feel that if we're only doing healthcare if we're doing something. Whereas now people realize that a quality conversation is itself a health intervention. I'll give you one example of a daughter after the mother has been visited by an occupational therapist, walking up the garden path with her afterwards. And the occupational therapist saying, "I'm very sorry, I didn't do anything there really for your mother." And she said, "Not at all. You were probably the first person who's actually truly listened to her." And that meant the world to them as a family. So in terms of this change, this transition, it takes time. And it also feels, early days, it feels like a bit of a failure, if I'm being honest. After a year of the funding coming through and us trying to change these conversations, we managed to reach 6 patients in this way, which we could honestly say we were working in this different way. It took a lot of persuasion and encouragement to encourage our staff to give it a go. And I felt that with such a small amount of result, I was still tied into the numbers, you see, at the time. I thought we couldn't possibly carry on. How could I go back and justify any more time on this? But the staff said, "No, I think you're onto something." And it was they who said, "We'd like to carry on." So in one team, we built it up within a single community team to work in this way. And people started to realize what was happening was subtle but profound. And it needed a lot of that support and encouragement, but gradually we started to do this further and further afield, to the point where it's become the normal way of doing things in our communities, that people will expect to have what we call this good conversation, this engagement with what matters to you, what difference would it make in your life if you were doing that? And they can start to imagine a better life for themselves. And in so doing, actually, there's far less healthcare intervention you have to put in, because they get on with it themselves. They find their own solutions, and they start to work and mobilize their own relationships, their own networks to achieve the kind of outcomes they want. I mean, little things can be something like somebody who's housebound just wants to be able to go down to the local supermarket to go shopping again. And by making the connections and encourage them, leaving them with that as their aspiration, they find their own solutions to it using their imagination. So this is the point that Violetta was saying about imagination as well, being so important. It's important for the clinical encounter too. This is all written up in a case study where we cover the conceptual architecture, which is more than just those 3 horizons framework, which is obviously the cornerstone. There are other conceptual frameworks that were useful for us as we went through this process together. The second part is all about the detail of that curve I've showed you. It's a year-by-year account of how hard it is to change the culture of care. You know, don't embark on this, we would say, alone. No solo climbers. You need to be working with a lot of other people to encourage this kind of shift. And then part 3 is about where do we go next? And part of the reason why I'm now working with IFF rather than in the healthcare system where I had been is to try and nurture that last mile from the community end. So it's that hook for more of our system to start feeding is to do that last mile. And both Barbara and Brett have been involved in that work with me, and I'm very grateful to their inputs for that. And then finally, just some lessons for policymakers and others who might want to take this on. So it's well worth the read, and that's all I had to say. You've got the Praxis Centre there with the website and the link to the section on transformative innovation in healthcare. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Margaret. Indeed, very interesting. So, I mean, I was tempted to ask this, and I'm going to do it. In this current global situation, day after day, right now we are breaking the world statistics in the number of infected people with COVID-19. So it seems like the end of the pandemic is moving, sliding away from our horizon, and a question comes very natural: what if the vaccine that we are so much longing for, what if it comes late, very late, or maybe that doesn't come at all? Or even if it comes, it could be that it won't resolve the crisis fully. So what would be the new normal? How could we go through better? My feeling is that, you know, more than half a year down the road from the first alarming spread outside China, let's say, we haven't learned enough. We were just, you know, kind of trying to resolve the immediate crisis, but we didn't really take it from the root. So how can we imagine the new normal right now?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, clearly what's happened with COVID is that it's exaggerated this challenge on the first horizon, and the first horizon's reaction is to innovate an even more exaggerated version of the innovation to prop it up. So there's billions of dollars worth of money going into vaccine development and more testing and more, scale is of something that we've never seen before. And yet, these are potentially false. This is false hope, because we might want to put all our eggs in those baskets, but that might manage to help us navigate COVID for the next few years. but I'm not at all convinced that it's the answer. It will contribute to a stabilization potentially of the spread. But then what happens when the next pandemic comes, and the next one, and the next one? So I think it's opening up a whole nother level of questions for us about our response. And what I will say is sometimes that sustaining innovations buy us time. So they are helpful in terms of keeping things going, but you've got to be thinking about more radical solutions for the longer term. And what we heard from Barbara was about the importance of the immune system. Violetta mentioned this at the outset as well. The immune system itself, and how is that kept well? And it's the immune, and our whole planet is interconnected. It's almost the whole planet has an immune system, if you like. It's so interconnected that we're really only beginning to realize the importance of the balance between human activity and animal health, for example, and the ecology of this planet. We cannot survive. We might get through this next bit of COVID over the next 5 years, but if we haven't addressed those deeper problems, it'll be a very temporary solution. I don't know if that helps answer the questions, and maybe Brett or Barbara want to add something.
It definitely illustrates the situation much better.
May I touch this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sonia, yes?
What's that for?
The star one is for helping cleaning the class up.
Well done.
I was the curriculum and I got one because we are always on.
I don't think it's related to the.
I think she's talking to somebody else.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, no, actually, I was gonna invite Barbara and Brad to elaborate maybe on. But my another question was, where have you noticed other good practices in taking or paying more attention to to the socio-economic determinants of health, and also on the approaches that you described in the case of NUCA system of care.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, because one of the things I'm now looking to try and do is map the third horizon in more clarity.
Yes.
And I'm very interested in any projects and programs that people have got anywhere in the world that are built around these insights, that relationships matter, that we need to be integrated in our environment, looking to find sustainable food, sustainable lives, localized lives. And I can give you lots of examples in the UK that is working in that way. The Compassion Project is a nice book that's just come out on a model in Frome in Somerset. There's a town in the northwest of England called Fleetwood that is doing some very interesting work with its community. I mean, they've basically got to the point where they know that healthcare can't provide them with their answers. And once you get to that point, and these are GPs, these are clinicians in the community, once they get to that point, they then start to look around for answers that lie in their own communities, and they start to do that discovery of strengths, resilience, and it's a very humbling experience when we work in this way, because you start to realize, you've put all of that money, investment, training, expertise into a system which it's become so fragmented that it's no longer meeting people's needs in the ways that Barbara so beautifully described. And yet the answers are on our doorsteps if we just help our communities to configure resilience at their level. It's happening all over the world now, Yuri.
I've witnessed examples of villages being designed and built and managed which are destined to people who are suffering for dementia diseases, in which they are safeguarded and where they can live relatively normal life. Of course, being assisted, but assisted not in a very narrow sense of of the world. So I believe these examples are many and can be more or less holistic or more or less focused to some particular situations, again related to socioeconomic factors that are in the root of some of the causes of bad health.
Violetta has her hand up.
Yeah, Violetta, sorry, please.
Yes, I mean, this discussion is really, really encouraging. I have for all three of you few questions or comments on. It seems like the health system is sharing similar behavior with many other systems. Do you see this as an overall sort of evolutionary shift of a society, that we are coming together to understand that partial approach doesn't work anymore and we need holistic, like circular approach? Are we ready for cross civilizational integration, like maybe Australia can help us in that? Or do you think we will be happy only if we invent everything by ourselves in this time and in this moment? That's first question. The second one is, when you observe the systems, when you try to intervene and improve them towards more relationship-based health system or care, what do you recognize as possible intervention that could speed up the process? Is there a role for regulation? Do you see any possible regulatory intervention which could speed up this transition? I mean, the reason I'm asking is because, again, of course, having this European experience behind me, we on the EU level have dramatically pushed towards green agenda and European Green Deal or Digital Europe in the relationship with the Green Deal, with regulatory interventions, being on the investment side or being in the content side, meaning pushing the shifting behavior of stakeholders and individuals and organizations. So these are the two questions which the reason I'm asking them is because I try to understand, is this a natural behavior that we are now facing, and can we speed it up in order to deliver faster results in a sense of better contribution to sustainability of our planet? And of course, do you see this sort of historic elements that are part of this change? Have you experienced that in your practice?
I think maybe Brett, you can answer this one to start.
I'm not sure if I can, to be honest. Thinking back on quite a few decades in the health system, and at a time I used to manage a public health unit, and I used to think how good I was at coming in on budget, until somebody said to me, "Are you crazy? If you come in on budget, they'll probably give you less next year because you can probably do with a bit less. What you need to do is go over your budget, like the hospitals do, because they always have to be bailed out." So I think the power of the dollar in influencing behavior, sadly, has to be considered. And when you've got a fee-for-service system, you only get paid when you churn patients through, and that's the system we've got at the moment, unfortunately. But we don't have in our Aboriginal medical services. They're salaried, so people there tend to be wanting to improve the health of the population as opposed to just getting an income, running a small business, which most general practitioners do in Australia. And my dream is that people get paid for actually improving the health of the population. I tried to get that happening with child health nurses, for example, where here they would see families coming in through the door, and just weigh the babies and talk to the mums, which is great. But I wanted them to actually have responsibility for the health of the children in that community. So the nurse would be allocated to a geographic area, but I had so much resistance to that it just didn't happen. So I think the system here at the moment is not conducive to a radical change. And I think it really has to come from the community demanding it. But of course, they don't demand it if they don't realise it's not as good as it should be. And I think that's where citizen juries are quite useful. I was part of the medical council here, and we ran workshops with people chosen from the electoral roll. So it was a random selection of people. They're invited to come and with a health economist, they were asked questions about how they would distribute funds when they realised most of the money, as I was saying, 97% goes towards treatment and only 3% to prevention. When they realised that, they said, oh no, we need to do more prevention. So unfortunately, the medical council was closed, and we're not sure why, but I assume we're heading towards actually confronting the current situation. So I can't think of any examples really in Australia. There could be some, but don't tend to hear about it. And I was chair of the Social Determinants of Health Alliance, and there were quite a number of organisations a member of that, and I didn't hear much going on, unfortunately. But I don't know of any examples.
Thank you. But actually, from what you're saying, it comes to my mind whether we have any grassroots movements of the size and impact we have on topics like the climate change or environmental protection or wildlife protection and so on, because I can't remember of any. However, I see Petra Kandus raising her hand.
Barbara, do you want to add something to this? Or Margaret, what's your experience?
Oh, Barbara.
I'd love to, if I may, join the two questions of Violeta together. And first of all, medicine cannot be different than society in which it is operating. It's basically a mirror of the society. But with all of our knowledge and professional status that is still given to medicine, I believe we have a greater responsibility to be a part of the needed change. At the moment, if I look at my colleagues, what is a pervasive mood is being ever more burdened, ever more disillusioned, burdened out, basically in a survival mode. But they don't, there are, for example, some glimpses of different ways of doing and thinking things, like we can introduce the healer's art to medical educations, and we get great responses, great feedbacks from students. Yet still in the structure of biomedical university, this is perceived as an add-on, as something nice to have, to show I have attended this and that, but still, of course, much less important than pathophysiology. As one participant once said, you want us to get our attention to the cherry on the cake. We don't have time for the cake, you know? It is still perceived in this regard. But they, colleagues, students are opening, we're giving a space, an open space where you can be safe in sharing your dreams and your turbulations, where you can drop down the defense of the existing framework, which it always happens. We just getting defensive. The moment anybody even asks a question, we just start defending the system as it is, and we just want to get back to the business as usual. But given the space, and I believe that this platform is such a space where we can meet and share our doubts and dreams, things get moved, things get shifted inside of people, and they carry it back to wherever they work. And what in regulatory part, what I would love to see, and I believe some of the countries are already doing it, is intersectorial governmental body, something that would be beyond politician parties and beyond different ministries, but wider than that, that would have health and well-being and thriving society as fundamental parameters of progress. So, and all other actions of separate ministries would be evaluated through it, would come together through it. So I would love to see something like that happen.
Okay, so we have to measure different things that reconnect with sustainability and well-being as such. That's for sure. But it comes back. The following question keeps turning back to me. Who are we calling for? Who can be the actors of change?
Well, I can answer that one because it's all of us, of course. And you know, there is a shift in our own minds about what the patterns that we talk about. The first, second, and third horizons are about choices about where we want to put our attention and effort. And we can choose to be part of the third horizon that's emerging, or we can spend all of our time wrapped up in first horizon concerns. It's up to us, really. And we won't do it overnight, but one of the things that is going to accelerate things is this COVID pandemic, because you know, it's quite interesting that our healthcare system is not being used as heavily because people don't want to go to the hospital anymore because they think they might get COVID by going there. So people are taking much more sort of thoughtful choices about their use of healthcare in this time. And in terms of the governance, I mean, since Barbara mentioned it, and I know I was going to, I got asked a little bit to do this. I'm going to share this screen that gives you an example. This is from the Scottish Government's performance framework. And it not only has it now a performance framework that is around these outcomes. We're healthy and active. We live in communities that are inclusive, empowered, resilient, and safe. We tackle poverty by sharing opportunities, wealth, power, and more equality. We're open, connected, etc. It also has this beautiful aesthetic around it, which I hadn't actually, since you asked me to look it up, I hadn't discovered this particular description of it. So they're actually now looking at this as a from an aesthetic angle as well, which I'm really delighted about. It's it's work in progress, like all of these policy initiatives, but I do think it's made a huge difference to our governance of Scotland, that all of our departments in government are working towards these common objectives. So I'll stop sharing at this point because I know Petra wanted to come in with her question.
Yeah, Petra?
Hello?
Hello, Petra, please.
Okay, all right. So yeah, I work in sustainability, just to introduce myself a little bit, but I have a background in biochemistry, and I worked in healthcare diagnostics for many years before switching over to sustainability. And I just wanted to thank everybody for this really compelling conversation. I love the fact that we are talking about what is possible and not necessarily digging into, okay, so how are we going to get it done? So first step is to just try to imagine what we would like our world to be in the future, and then see how we get there. But anyway, I just wanted to make a comment on Brett's former, one of the graphs that he showed about the healthcare systems across the world, where he compared the US and other countries. And just full disclosure, I spent more than 30 years in the United States. I'm living in Slovenia at the moment to be closer to my aging father, but Definitely, the United States healthcare system is a poster child for socialized medicine, because it's being so profit driven is a recipe for inequality. It's based on inequality and perpetuates inequality. And some of the basic things like birth control and prenatal care is politicized, and I can attest from my own experience that even preventive care is not necessarily covered. I'm still fighting over a $1,000 bill for a mammogram that should have been just part of the anyway, enough of that. So I did want to just spend a couple minutes addressing some of the really compelling things that I got out of this conversation so far. And I come from it from a sustainability standpoint as well. And you know, I think that what this COVID crisis has done, at least at the beginning, when people were still a bit in shock, was to kind of get the understanding that we are all connected and everything is connected, and people are making connections. Where is all this coming from? And is it, you know, really what we're doing to nature? And we really should be, did Mother Earth really send us into timeout because of this? And so I draw parallels in, you know, sustainability to healthcare here, because when we're talking about resilience and sustainability, more and more we are talking about what makes the most resilient system, and the most resilient systems don't tend to be the ones where you're putting up the most barriers against the nature's invasion, but are the ones where you're working with nature. So any kind of natural systems that are incorporated into the living environment, be it floodplains or like mangrove forests or anything like that. So those are the most resilient. Those are the most successful in really dealing with these tremendous new onslaughts of nature. So perhaps there's a parallel here to healthcare, and as we're returning in sustainability more to and looking back to the way our ancestors or people who have lived before us, ancient civilizations have really survived so many years without any modern medicine. Yet they've used whatever they found around them. They've used herbal approaches. They've used the Eastern medicine with the yin and yang. And I'm just speaking like that because I don't really know about it. But it's all about the balances. It's the balance in the system. It's the balance. It's how the human body is in balance with its surrounding environment. So I'm just wondering if the future of medicine, you know, could incorporate some of these other ways of thinking, and without and if there is some kind of research that actually proves its effectiveness, that would convince others that it's actually worthwhile pursuing. I do know that meditation was one of those things that has actually been proven scientifically to have a beneficial effect on people's well-being. Perhaps other types of these approaches that we were discussing today could be done as well, and you know, basically start to blur the lines between Western medicine and more traditional medicine. And then of course there's this whole big unknown aspect of the human biome, and how, you know, there are more cells of bacilli and other life forms that live inside our body than our actual cells. So the interaction of those cells with our human body are, I think, still an uncharted territory that I'm hoping that will be worthy of more research in the future. So thank you. I hope I didn't take too much time.
Thank you very much for these insights. Petra, would you mind if I ask you a favor? Would you put down some of these challenges for the next time?
Sure.
In a short paragraph, because we are over time, and it's
sorry.
not. I mean, but that's not because of you. That's because I believe taking it from the positive side. I think because the topic is very interesting, and but we have to wrap it up now slowly and prepare ourselves for the next session in a week time. This is on the 23rd of September. Again, at 3 p.m., where we would like to make some kind of a synthesis. A week time gives us a chance to think through the topic once more. I believe that our speakers can share the presentations with us in such a way that we would be able to send you links from where you can download them. This session is being recorded, so you can at any time you can get back and maybe listen again parts of it or the entire stream if you like, and it would be very helpful for all of us if anybody could, and you're all invited to send us maybe a question, a short comment that will help me particularly prepare this wrap-up session, where we would like to draw some conclusions, because as Petra, you rightly challenged us, I think we really understand the problem much better than 2 hours ago, but we can still discuss much more about how to move towards what is our common visioning here, the eco-civilization. And so I would really appreciate it if you can help me with that, and anybody else, of course, as well. Any other comments before we close it for today?
Very quick comment.
Please.
There's two things that have come through today. I've just completed a degree in psychology, and I could not at any time put any of my personal belief or understanding. I was taught to read, research, and regurgitate, and make sure I was below P0.005 in anything I did. And that doesn't allow you then to move into practice and work with people freely, because it teaches you to be fearful over doing things wrong. We need to move people working with people away from that to go, we need you to have a strong foundation in science, but we need you to be a human, not we need you to be a scientist. First and foremost, we need humans with knowledge, not knowledge stuck into humans. And the second one, due to COVID, I'm talking to neighbours. I've lived in the street now for 12 years. I'm talking to neighbours because of behavioural immunity system. They're scared to find out if I'm ill or they're ill. And we're talking to each other, and it's not because they're interested in well-being originally. It's moved to that. But originally it was, hi, what's your telephone number? Just in case you become ill, give us a call. And I picked up, it was a sense of, if COVID's in my street, I want to know it. But if you could twist that, it's twisted now to, how are you doing? How's your week going? How's your gardening going? And we're talking to one another. So COVID has sparked community from fear. And I think we need to harness that positivity to we're talking for the first time as communities. Even though it came out behavior immunity, now, are you well? To actually, I'm well, how are you doing? And continue that conversation. How do we harness that as a European collective?
Very well, Andrew. Thank you for that. Brad, Barbara, Margaret, any last comments from your side, and then Violeta?
Not from me. I think this has been very helpful. Thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
Show you this book, which was written in 1994 about the coming plague, and the last page, which I've been looking at so much it's fallen out, and it's a quote which says, "The world really is just one village. Our tolerance of disease in any place in the world is at our peril." This is by Liederberg, and he says, "Are we better off today than when we were a century ago. In most respects, we're worse off. We've been neglectful of the microbes, and that is a recurring theme that is coming back to haunt us. And then in the end, it seems that American journalist Stone was right when he said, either we learn to live together or we die together. So the author, Laurie Garrett, says, while the human race battles itself, fighting over ever more crowded turf and scarcer resources, the advantage moves to the microbes' court. They are our predators, and they will be victorious if we, Homo sapiens, do not learn how to live in a rational global village that affords the microbes few opportunities. It's either that or we brace ourselves for the coming plague. So going back to normal is not what we want to do. We want to, I guess, learn lessons from COVID that we actually need to change our modus operandi as a community. And so it's great to be part of this conversation to explore how we do that.
Thank you indeed. Barbara, any last comment?
Looking forward to next week, and
Okay.
was really a precious opportunity. You know, in the biomedical world, we are used to execution of pre-designed tasks, not so much of creative thinking. So I'm really looking forward to some more.
Thank you. And Violeta, here's to you.
Well, I am very excited. I mean, I think a lot of people are getting tired, but I'm getting powered up. I mean, I've heard some very important messages. First of all, is that we're all sensing that disconnecting from yourself and from the world around you is actually not natural behavior of Homo sapiens. That is something that I think we should keep repeating over and over again everywhere, especially in schools and education system, but also in the neighborhoods and in our day-to-day conversations. And once we acknowledge that, we can start addressing it. So that's one very important message at least I will continue to push in the text related to eco-civilization. The second one, which I've heard from all of you and from comments as well, that Petra shared and Andrew, I've heard that relationships are the essence. So I'm so happy because I feel that we are onto something in this concept of eco-civilization, where we are stressing that the next the shifting paradigm will come from the relationship concept, and will push technology into the business as usual, and will take over into the key role in shaping the future of our society. That's another thing that I'd like to keep exploring, and I'm excited about potential of a new physics that will come forward, which will be based on quantum physics, which already relationship-based concepts are the essence of quantum physics. And but we know that there is something more, yeah, and we see videos popping up everywhere, and yeah, that's another Greek excitement, because we might just be at the core of it. We just need to keep our senses open and pick it up when the time is right. So that's the second element that absolutely will become the essential part of our future discussions. And the third one is this holistic approach, where things that none of you really acknowledge it. I try to provoke it, but I feel that we are at the end of the era, which was absolutely necessary for individual to establish itself in the relationship with the system. Because in previous civilizations, the systems were so strong. And then through science and through this very consumer-oriented economy, we gave individualism a chance to recognize itself and to establish itself as an important element, individuum as part of the whole system. But I feel that we are at the end, that this concept has exhausted itself. I mean, this could probably explain all these extreme reactions now that are everywhere around the world. So what's the next step then? We've had a very system thinking. We have now very individualistic. So is the integration the next step? How can we sort of manage it better? And so those are the questions for the next discussions. So I hope that some of them will be addressed already next week, but even more in our future discussions on other topics. But guys, you were incredible. Each of you just opened such a wide world to explore. Of course, it's good to bring these topics to the level of just individual who has no clue really about these subjects, but I think that there are more and more of people who are interested in, and they need this kind of simple but very professional explanations of very complex subjects. And as you said, only together we can change things, but we need to know about each other, and we need to be aware that what needs to be changed. So thanks a lot. I'm really,
Thank you, Violeta. Thank you, everybody. Also, Jens Östergaard for your comments, and Andrew and Petra. I would really like to thank once more to Barbara, Brett, and Margaret for their really thorough preparation. I know there was quite some coordination before this session, and quite some time invested to prepare this really well. And I really have to admit, you really open new horizons to me, I believe to all of us. I'm really looking forward to the second part in a week time. I really enjoyed it, and I thank you in the name of all of us. Have a nice evening, have a good night, Brett. I'm looking forward to seeing you very soon again on the topic. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot to everyone.
All right.
Ciao.